Begin with the world as it stood before anyone dared to imagine wolves and lions hunting together. The North was inward, dutiful, and poor in coin but rich in men, timber, and ice-hardened loyalty. The Westerlands were outward, acquisitive, and flush with gold on parchment if not always in the ground, rich in credit and merchants and the memory of Tywin's order. The Tullis bridged them with placid rivers and old etiquette. The Baratheon branches clawed at each other's throats on the eastern coasts. The Tyrells fed the realm as they fed their vanity. The Martells watched and waited, and the Vale peered down from its heights, aloof yet sensitive to insult. On the wall the Knights' watch thinned and the free folk grew bolder. Farther north still, a threat older than politics stirred without a herald. King Robert hunted his last, and with his breath went the habit of letting old friends forgive new offenses. Into that vacuum, the Lannisters moved with the pretense of law and the certainty of steel, and the Starks, stiff with duty, stated plainly what others whispered about lineage, succession, and the mortal danger of false heirs. The baseline was predictable once you accept human nature. Resentments that Tywin had banked like drafts of coin became soldiers in sieges. Ned's integrity proved brittle against a city that ran on bribes. Renly wagered his charisma and Stannis wagered his law. The Reach traded bread for a crown. The Ironborn sniffed the wind and chose raiding over patience. Chaos did not erupt. It was planned by men whose plans were simple: rule or ruin. In that line of time, the Stark words became a funeral march and Lannister gold covered debts and blood until even gold could not mask the smoke. Everyone knows the rest. The Riverlands burned, the North bled, the South starved, and in the end the throne belonged mostly to whoever could afford the next convoy of grain and the next loan from a bank that does not forgive. But a different calculus exists if two essential decisions are made before the city devours the last honest man. If Eddard Stark chooses postponement over purity, and if Tywin Lannister chooses dynasty over daughter, then a narrow channel opens. The precise hinge is the interval between the boar's charge and Robert's funeral bier, when messages outrun armies and a signature is more powerful than a sword. The mechanism is not theatrical. It is clerical. Eddard drafts 2 ravens, one to Winterfell and one to Casterly Rock, the first instructing Robb to muster but not march and the second offering terms that tantalize Tywin's instincts. A double betrothal sealing a mutual defense compact, Sansa to Tommen and Robb to Myrcella. Reciprocal fostering to harden the bond, Tommen to Winterfell and Arya to Casterly Rock. A public settlement that names Tommen, styled as Robert's son regardless of private knowledge, as heir under a regency council balanced between North and West. And immediate reprieve for Jaime's honor question by a carefully worded royal decree assigning blame for Aerys' end to necessity in defense of the realm. In exchange, the Lannister host stands down from predation against the Riverlands. The City Watch is funded for 2 years from Westerland advances rather than seized by sudden bribes, and the North guarantees the overland grain route from White Harbor to King's Landing to reduce dependence on Reach shipping. He does not confess the truth of parentage in ink. He hints the secret exists and can be contained if the Rock accepts the path that consoles it. This is the compact. More than a marriage, less than a merger, a bargain to keep the present stable long enough to push the future into a shape both sides can survive. Would Tywin accept such a scroll? Given the man's values, legacy over affection, image over intimacy, order over chaos, the probability that he says yes if the language neutralizes immediate threats rises above even. If offered codominion in a regency and the means to domesticate the North without a single siege, he accepts in roughly 6 cases out of 10. The refusal cases come not from principle but from pride. If the draft impugns Lannister honor, if it demands public penance from Cersei, or if it implies that Tywin must treat a northern lord as an equal in the capital rather than as a tolerated provincial, then he will prefer war and convince himself that war will be brief. The remaining slice, call it 2 cases out of 10, features calculation. If he believes Renly and the Tyrells are already proving to be the better bride price, he may wait to bid. Eddard's acceptance of his own compromise is the harder moral question but an easier political one. When the choice is between the abstract purity of legal succession and the practical protection of his daughters, his people, and the Watch, a man whose honor is tied to their safety can sanction a lie he does not speak aloud. I rate Ned's willingness to sign at 7 in 10 if he believes he can shape the Regency into clean rule. 3 in 10 if his scruples revolt when he considers Stannis. Those ratios are not precise, but they are useful, and the usefulness lies in the pairing. You only need both men to say yes once. The initial branching for the Starks concerns whether Robb accepts betrothal to Myrcella and whether Catelyn accepts sending Arya to Casterly Rock. Robb's decision is a question about the cost of adult politics, not about love. As yet unwounded by Southern oaths, he knows the marriage would purchase peace and time, and the likelihood he assents is high, perhaps 8 in 10. Catelyn's resistance to shipping a wild daughter to a lion's den is emotional but not irrational. If the alternative is trading Arya for hostages taken later by force, she will align with the strategy in roughly 2 of 3 worlds. From the Lannister side, Cersei's compliance is the volatile factor. She will object to sending Tommen north and to conceding a regency that dilutes her hand, and Tywin will either coerce or sideline her. The chance he can coerce without breaking the compact is better than even, say, 6 in 10, but the chance of Cersei poisoning the well later never drops below half. Jaime is easier to predict. Freed from the stink of kingslaying by a legal fiction, he prefers tourney honor and Casterly loyalty to intrigues. He adjusts to the compact if it keeps him close to family and far from courts. With the compact signed quietly and revealed publicly as an expansion of the already announced Sansa betrothal, the timeline of effects begins. The first month is narrative warfare. The city needs to believe nothing is broken. A proclamation names Tommen as heir apparent with Ned Stark as Hand Continuing and Tywin Lannister as Lord Protector of the Realm during the minority, cloaking the fact that both offices overlap. Joffrey is not disowned in public. He is praised in phrases that grow thinner by the day and then is sent to Casterly Rock for his education in lordship, which in practice removes him from the throne room. The City Watch received 2 years of arrears and promises of equipment out of Westerland's advances secured by crown bonds. Janos Slynt salutes whoever pays him, and this time he salutes both. Littlefinger remains master of coin for the moment because he knows where every debt is buried, but he is placed under dual audit. Varys smiles in all directions and keeps his little birds alive because his product, information delivered without panic, has suddenly become more valuable than ever. Eddard's household guard do not die in an alley. Pycelle has fewer letters to misplace. The first Stark Lannister incident resolved in the open is not a prison door slamming but a betrothal feast worded to flatter both gods, the old and the new. By month 3 the military geometry changes, and with it the diplomatic options. Robb's host never marches south in anger. Instead he drills, builds depots along the King's Road, and moves timber crews to reinforce the neck with causeways controllable by northern men. Tywin's Westermen do not ravage the Riverlands. In exchange for restraint, Edmure Tully reopens the Golden Tooth's trade escorts and allows Lannister caravans to cross with tax collectors present from both sides. This does not make the Tullys love their rivals. It does make them solvent. The small council issues writs to ports from White Harbor to Lannisport to remain open to each other's ships. Within 6 months, freight insurance rates between those 2 harbors fall by 1/3, and the effect is visible in the markets of King's Landing as prices for dried cod, northern timber, and western smithing iron stabilize. These are dull facts, but dull facts stop riots. The realm's breadbasket remains the Reach, and the Tyrells wake to the reality that their easiest route to relevance, Renly's smile, has lost some of its shine. They are not fools. Within a season Mace Tyrell will either press his daughter upon the new heir if he can, or he will demand proof that his grain ships will be permitted the same docking precedents and payments under this new compact. If he is courted cleverly, he can be kept sated with honors and monopolies rather than a crown. If he is slighted, he will quietly finance someone who promises to need him more. While the center cools, the periphery tests the bargain. Stannis Baratheon, in any world, believes the law is himself and himself the law. He will demand a hearing on legitimacy, and if he receives only smooth words, he sails toward open defiance. The compact can buy him off with Storm's End confirmed, Dragonstone fortified at crown expense, and royal backing for his fleet's patrols against Lysene and Myrish Reavers. The chance he accepts such a practical bribe is not 0, but it is limited by his temperament to perhaps 3 in 10. The other 7 lead to a slow-burn confrontation on the Blackwater next year, with fewer allies for him because Renly no longer carries the Reach in his pocket. In this slower burn, Melisandre has more time to work her odd arts, and that cuts several ways. A slower war gives more opportunity for negotiation and more time for combustible miracles. Balon Greyjoy will test any peace that ties the North's hands. Under the baseline, he waited for northern armies to be 200 leagues away and then raided. In this alternate, Robb is not south. The chance Balon still raises his Kraken is lower, perhaps 5 in 10 rather than 8 in 10, because he does not smell blood in the water. Much depends on whether Theon remains hostage in Winterfell or is sent to Pike as an emissary under the new dispensation. Keeping Theon as a pledge of peace lowers Balon's pride but keeps Winterfell honest about Pike's intentions. Sending Theon home carries a 30% chance of persuading his father into a treaty of mutual raiding rights against Stepstone's pirates, which would be a cheap buy for the crown, and a 70% chance that Balon sees softness and proceeds with the old way regardless. If the Ironborn do rise, they meet a North that is home, supplied, and backed by Lannister gold for ships out of Lannisport. A northern fleet built under southern loan terms is an ugly sentence, but it wins wars at sea. The economic effects inside 6 months are visible on ledgers rather than banners. Tywin's credit unlocks repairs to the Rosby Road and the Massey Hook harbors, and the Master of Coin is forced to publish a partial schedule of crown debts. A thing Littlefinger never wished to do. The Iron Bank watches. That is the point. If Braavos sees a dual regency capable of paying interest and not merely printing favors, new bonds will be bought and old ones rolled over. Winter's approach keeps everyone honest because the penalty for failure is starvation. White Harbor becomes a strategic hinge in a way it never was under a war footing. Grain stored in cavern icehouses can be shipped south when the Mander is too crowded, and in extra. NGE for this favor, the North squeezes customs exemptions for northern timber and fur, which marginally enriches small houses that would otherwise resent the southern tie. These quiet bribes matter. They convert political acquiescence into cash flow dependence. By the end of the first year, if the compact holds, there will be a faction among northern and western merchants who will lobby their lords to avoid war because war will bankrupt them personally. Diplomatically, the compact pressures the Eyrie and Sunspear in opposite ways. Lisa Arryn's isolation grows harder to justify if her sister's household is safe and prospering under a shared regency. Word from merchants that the King's Road is patrolled jointly by Wolf and Lion undermines the Vale's tales of chaos beyond the Bloody Gate. Give this a year and the Vale's barons will approach Ned Stark quietly, asking for assurances that their levies will not be squandered. Once granted, they will begin sending sons to court again to keep their names in the conversation. Dorne is another matter. Oberyn Martell calculates. An alliance that reduces Tyrell leverage is good for Dorne. An alliance that strengthens Lannister impunity is bad for Dorne. He will test the Compact's appetite for justice over Elaya's murder. The Compact can survive that test only by agreeing to reopen inquiries against the Mountain under a legal cover that does not directly indict Tywin. That is fine lawyering and dangerous politics. Its success probability depends on whether the Rock is prepared to sacrifice one of its blunt instruments for a quiet border. If Tywin believes the Mountain has already served his purpose, he will permit a trial with predetermined outcomes. If he thinks fear in the Riverlands must continue as a message, he will refuse. That choice forecasts whether this alliance has a conscience or only a contract. From months 12 to 24, the military balance resets around 3 realities that the baseline war obscured. First, the City Watch over time is more loyal to its paymaster than to any prince. Dual paymaster arrangements breed divided loyalties, but they also breed a professional culture that resists being thrown into suicidal street battles. A capital that is calm for a year develops habits of normalcy that are hard to break without special effort. Second, the Riverlands, unburned, remain the realm's float. Bridges intact mean revenue intact, and revenue intact means the crown can purchase grain during the first real winter months without begging. Third, the wall becomes an ear that rulers can hear rather than a myth. Ned Stark will send men and money north over and above the usual, and Tywin will view this as a northern eccentricity worth tolerating to keep his partner stable. 100 extra men garrisoned at Castle Black is not a political bauble. It is a small insurance policy that looks cheap until you need it. If reports of whites and white shadows remain only stories, this will be counted as waste. If they are more than stories, the alliance will be tested in a way that no coronation can resolve. Winners and losers emerge not from speeches but from the math of who can extract rents and who must pay them. In the near term, the winners are the Lannister treasury, the northern peasantry, the merchants of White Harbor and Lannisport, and the small folk of King's Landing who will not starve the first winter because a wolf signed a ledger. The losers are the opportunists who require flames to justify their ascent. Peter Baelish sees his private credit empire audited. Varys sees his necessity reduced unless he can reinvent it as honest intelligence. The Freys lose their most lucrative leverage, bridges over which refugees must flee, and the Boltons lose a pretext for necessary cruelty to polish their reputation. The Tyrells neither win nor lose. They are forced to accept payment in coin rather than titles in year one, and they regard this as a temporary insult. Stannis loses in the medium term if he refuses to bend. Each month of calm drains his cause of urgency, and men love legitimacy only when it looks like stability. Dorne waits and watches. The Vale sidles gradually back to relevance. The Ironborn either punch into a ready fist or accept commercial concessions that offend their priests. The Compact's sensing mechanisms must be trust, hostages, faith, and supply. Trust between Stark and Lannister is unnatural and must be engineered from two devices that both sides understand. The first is reciprocal hostage-taking dressed as fostering. Sending Tommen north and Arya west is not merely symbolism. It is a daily reminder that betrayals have faces. If either hostage is withdrawn prematurely, the market updates its belief and the risk of defection spikes. As long as the hostages are where they should be, baseline trust hovers around a practiced cold courtesy, perhaps a 60% confidence that agreements will be honored. The second device is joint profit. If the tax farmers in the Riverlands and at the Mander's Mouth remit percentages to a shared chest from which city garrisons are paid, each treasury has an incentive to police the other's greed. If at any point one party unilaterally doubles a levy, the other's merchants howl, and that howl is a political instrument at court. Sustained trust above that 60% requires a positive shock, shared victory, or averted famine, while dips below 40% will trigger arms movement long before banners are raised. Hostages are stabilizers until they become triggers. They function if two conditions hold. The children are treated conspicuously well and their parents retain agency. If Cersei believes Arya's presence in the Rock humiliates her, she will sabotage the framework. If Catelyn believes Tommen is a checkmate against her, she will sabotage it from the northern end. The right way to manage this is to ritualize the fostering. Twice yearly ceremonial exchanges for named feasts ento. Uriges laden with gifts from the opposite region's artisans, bards paid to memorialize the courtesy, and a written schedule specifying the children's tutors observable by traveling septons and maesters. This is expensive theater not because the lords need it, but because the lords need their people to need it. If the ritual is broken, it should be broken for reasons that can be publicly pardoned. Plague outbreak, shipwreck, not for reasons of pique. Should a hostage die by mischance, and chance kills without politics, the compact survives only if accountability is immediate and compensation visible. And even then the chance of a slide to war jumps dramatically to 9 in 10 if Cersei is the mother who hears the news. Faith pressure is a tertiary risk that democratizes discontent. The capital's religious mood is a thermometer for food prices and perceived sin at court. A regency that defers to septons, moderates its decadence, and visibly supports repairs to seps in the Crownlands lowers the chance of a high Sparrow-style movement later to perhaps 2 in 10 from the baseline 6 in 10. But the North does not share that faith, and every public act of piety in the capital risks looking like condescension to northern eyes unless coupled with parallel respect for heart trees. The compact can handle dual rights. It cannot handle zealotry. If the faith begins to smell scandal, whispered bastardy, lavish loans to exempted bankers, public cruelty by queens or queens in training, it will mobilize the poor around a moral frame and create a threat the compact is poorly designed to meet, since shared legitimacy is precisely what mobs reject. The best inoculation is to keep the queenly figure young, courteous, and perceived as a victim of politics rather than a practitioner. Sansa fulfills that profile more easily than most. If she is seen to pray and to feed, the faith's knives look more like treason than justice when unsheathed. Supply is the non-negotiable axis because winter neither negotiates nor cares about houses. Food for King's Landing requires 3 flows timed to the season: fall fleets from the Reach, winter caravans from the north along the Rose Road and the King's Road, and spring trickles from the Stormlands and Crownlands. Each flow depends on escorts and coin. Escorts depend on loyalty and coin. Coin depends on tax receipts and bonds. Should any two fail in sequence, the third collapses under weight of demand. The compact's advantage is the redundancy it provides. If Mander ships are interdicted by storms or boycotts, Lannisport can push cogs along the coast while the North moves carts through the neck. The bottleneck is not harvest. It is storage and last-mile delivery into a city whose streets can riot over rumor. Investment in granaries inside the city and in mobile bakeries guarded by the Watch is dull work that prevents spectacular disasters. If those investments are neglected, if corruption eats their budgets or pride ignores their necessity, then even a peaceful winter can become a political winter. No alliance survives a starving capital that knows the names of its regents. 3 end states are plausible, each with a cost paid in different currencies. The first is Cold Concord. Under this path, the compact survives the first winter. Stannis is contained or bought. Renly fades into prosperity with a Tyrell bride and no throne, and the Ironborn are deterred by credible northern readiness. The king is crowned as Tommen with Sansa beside him, their union wrapped in language that soothes the southern faithful and northern traditionalists alike. Tywin governs the numbers, Ned governs the laws, Kevin smooths, Varys delivers discreet threats. Littlefinger is shunted to a safe sinecure far from the counting house. Jaime retires to Casterly honor. Cersei fumes but lacks allies to disrupt without destroying her sons. After 2 years of joint rule, the city recognizes the stability as reality rather than pretense. The next decade looks like prudent consolidation. The Riverlands repave roads, the North mills more timber, the West invests in mines that decline more slowly because of better engineering, the Crown retires a fraction of its Braavosi debt each year, and the Watch is replenished with second sons because it is fashionable in a world that has forgiven itself for almost breaking. The cost is that the realm swallows 2 lies. The first is that the bloodline on the throne is what the songs claim. The second is that justice for past murders and betrayals is optional when the sums do not require it. Those lies calcify into policy. They breed resentment at the margins that will take a generation to turn poisonous or to wear away. If the others remain myths, Cold Concord becomes a story of boring prosperity where grievance entrepreneurs struggle to find purchase. If the others prove real in force, Cold Concord gives the realm its only real chance. Finance, logistics, and a command structure unfractured enough to respond quickly to northern alarms. In that case, the cost paid in dishonor buys survival in lives saved. The second end state is the Golden Trap. The compact achieves the immediate goals: no southern war, no burning Riverlands, a quiet winter, and then the Lannister leadership concludes that the North is useful as a shield but intolerable as a partner. The trigger can be as simple as a northern demand to prosecute one of Tywin's captains for river murders committed before the compact took hold, or as complex as a vote inside the Regency Council where Ned's legalism blocks a profitable extortion. Pride does not need a good reason. It needs a mood. In this path, Tywin cultivates soft knives, Bolton ambition, Fry insecurity, Karstark impatience, and offers them a contract that pays better than patience. He cannot stage a red wedding as in the baseline without the pretext of war, but he can manufacture judicial murders or frontier accidents and then declare the North unstable, requiring Ewardianship by more rational men. If he moves slowly, isolating Winterfell with 1,000 paper cuts, he may attempt to separate grain subsidies and port privileges from Stark compliance, creating a public argument that the North cannot be both exceptional and equal. The chance of this path is real, perhaps 4 in 10 in any sustained union across such divergent political cultures. The cost is immediate and ugly if it detonates. A war begun under a compact is a fratricide. It turns every merchant house into a traitor to someone, every fostered child into a hostage too dangerous to keep alive. Unlike the baseline war, this one starts with roads intact and treasuries fuller. It will be brutal and fast. The long-run cost is legitimacy decay that no future alliance will repair easily. If Golden Trap plays out while winter still bites, famine magnifies betrayal. Food becomes a weapon. The capital's mobs find a faith-flavored vocabulary for vengeance, and a high sparrow figure rides that wave. In the extreme version, the Crown defaults on debts, the Iron Bank funds a rival, and Dorne and the Reach choose opposite sides to settle old scores, turning a civil war into a continental one. The third end state is the austere coalition. It begins like cold concord but pivots under pressure from the north that cannot be ignored. Reports from the wall stop sounding like stories. White shadows and blue eyes are seen by men who do not drink before dawn. Ranging parties vanish. Wildling tribes flee south. Ravens return charred. Ned Stark makes his most northern plea on the council floor. Tywin's eyes register the words as a demand for money and men that yield no immediate political return. The alliance has two choices: treat it as a northern obsession and consent to token aid, or accept that a war unlike southern wars is approaching, one that will not yield estates or crowns. The path of token aid leads to failure on the ice and panic in the capital when grimmer news arrives. The path of acceptance leads to a wartime economy before obvious war. If the compact is strong enough, if trust remains above that 60% line, if hostages are still smiling at feasts, if the faith sees the northern fight as pious defense rather than pagan nonsense, then the crown can execute a plan few in the realm have ever seen. A levy that does not empty fields. A bonded loan whose interest the Iron Bank believes in because Tywin's signature sits beside Ned's. A flow of grain that goes north rather than south at the exact moment merchants feel south's. Hunger. A temporary maritime truce with the Ironborn bought with amnesties for piracy committed beyond certain meridians. And a religious campaign to declare defense against the cold as a sacred obligation for all 7 gods and all their septs. This is austere because it runs the treasury to paper-thin margins. It displaces southern luxuries. It forces Lannisters to be frugal and Starks to be cosmopolitan. It also has a cost in pride. Dorne and the Reach will ask why they must pray northern prayers. The Vale will send knights but grumble. The Stormlands will ask for ships and money they will misuse. If the others are defeated or held, this coalition's legitimacy surpasses any the realm has seen since the dragons died. If the coalition fails, the cost is existential and no political accounting matters. A proper analysis must return to branch points and test their sensitivity. Trust rests on attitudes toward truth. If Eddard Stark cannot abide crowning a boy he knows is wrong-blooded, he will either expose the lie or resign. Exposure destroys the compact immediately. Resignation destroys it slowly. Resignation is more likely because he would rather retreat than perjure himself outright, but retreat seats King's Landing to Tywin unopposed, and then the baseline replay begins with a smaller northern margin for error. On the other side, if Tywin cannot tolerate any constraint, even in exchange for stability, he will provoke crises until the north blinks or bolts. Small humiliations reveal his preference ordering. The first time he refuses to seat a northern judge over a Lannister vassal's case, or the first time he ignores a joint audit's findings, is an early warning. Hostages can either dampen or amplify these frictions. A perfectly behaved Tommen in Winterfell is a sweetheart deal for the crown's image and for trust. An injured Tommen, even by childish accident, hands Cersei a torch. Preventing that accident is as much political work as it is nursery work. Faith pressure runs on 3 inputs: scandal, scarcity, and stories. Scandal is manageable by discipline. The compact must teach its young to be dull in public. Scarcity is manageable by supply chains described earlier. The compact must spend money on warehouses rather than on tapestries. Stories are trickier. A sympathetic queen shapes stories whether she wills it or not. If Sansa is the face of the regime, the faith has fewer easy lines of attack. If Cersei regains primacy, the faith has its favorite villain, and the wildfire that burns a city can be poured from a chalice with a 7-pointed star. The likelihood of a faith revolt under Cold Concord is low so long as prices and proprieties hold. Under Golden Trap it's high. Under Austere Coalition it depends on whether the coalition sacrifices are shared or seem to be imposed on the poor. Supply is where cleverness ends and capacity begins. It is not enough to say that the North will send grain. The North has grain that keeps Northerners alive and that spoils on long journeys if poorly stored. Any plan that assumes Northern grain will feed the capital must invest in Northern logistics. Cask makers, icehouse refurbishments, teams of oxen, halts along the neck, and barges that fit the Green Fork's fickle shallows. Those are costs with no songs. The Westerlands can help, not by sending gold to be counted, but by prepaying for the carts and the casks, by underwriting merc. Hant bonds that allow White Harbor to borrow at Bravosi rates, and by assigning reputable Lannisport captains to winter convoy duty along the coast. If that happens, the Alliance can keep King's Landing fed and its taverns just thirsty enough to tolerate the cold. If it does not, and if the Reach chooses to flex its leverage, hunger will make even a well-conceived compact into kindling. The choices available to each house evolve as the compact's success feeds back on itself. For the Starks after year one, the forks are whether to press for justice on old wounds and whether to institutionalize the Alliance into law. Pressing for justice on the Mountain or Gregors like is righteous but risky. The timing matters. Push early and you make Tywin defensive. Delay and you look complicit. The optimal play is to wait for two visible Lannister concessions in other domains, debt transparency and Riverland's restitution, and then insist on an investigation that names victims without naming command responsibility. The likelihood of success here is 50-50, but even failure can be turned into a moral argument for slower disarmament. Institutionalizing the Alliance means more than marriages. It requires charters for joint garrisons, standardized toll rates across their borders, and an arbitration panel presided over by a neutral maester chosen from the Citadel. The Lannisters will dislike any structure they do not control. The Starks will dislike any structure that smells like Southern sophistry. The middle ground is a set of signed customs tables and regimental drill books that both sides pretend are temporary, and that in fact become permanent. I rate the chance of partial institutionalization at 6 in 10 by year 3 if cold concord prevails. For the Lannisters, the branching focuses on succession management and credit. Succession management underlies every smile. Tywin must decide whether to treat Sansa as a queen in truth or an ornament, and whether to groom Tommen toward northern virtues or southern ones. Grooming him northward, visits to winter courts, hunts that teach restraint rather than spectacle. Makes him a king acceptable in the neck. Grooming him southward, masks, tournaments, wandering huntsmen. Makes him a king acceptable in the Reach but suspect elsewhere. Tywin's instinct is to make kings as he makes stewards. Efficient, feared, and correct. If he listens to that instinct alone, he will forget that a king in a cold realm must also be loved by people who do not love gold. On credit, Tywin is trapped by his past triumphs. He has solved problems with coin so often that he may attempt to purchase away political debts. That works until the mine's decline becomes impossible to hide. If the gold flow is thinner than the ledgers pretend, and if the Iron Bank starts pricing Lannister paper nearer to market, the Alliance becomes a hedge for the West while the West is also a liability for the Alliance. In that moment, the North's honesty becomes the realm's collateral. Tywin will hate that mathematics. Whether he accepts it peacefully determines whether Golden Trap triggers. Personality can derail or sublimate strategy, and so it is fair to model the troublemakers. Cersei has a capacity to convert minor slights into existential struggles. If her power is publicly trimmed, if she is seen to be overruled on a council matter central to her pride, she escalates through her sons and her lovers. The compact must deny her that route by making her son's northern fostering the proof of her motherhood's success rather than a theft. It is delicate. Jaime, under legal absolution, can be used as a bridge if he is stationed occasionally at Winterfell as the king's uncle, charming northerners with competence and restraint. He can also be a spark if rumors about the queen's bed swirl anew. Littlefinger thrives in cracks between allies. The best way to neutralize him is neither exile nor execution but entanglement in responsibilities whose outputs can be audited by dull men. Make him master of fisheries. He will drown from boredom. Varys is most useful when danger is amorphous. Give him the wall and tell him his birds shall listen there as well as in the capital. If he produces 10 useful warnings about white shadows, he will be believed. If he fails, he will learn humility in a cold place. The earliest tactical crisis under this alliance occurs not on a battlefield but at a dock. A Tyrell convoy arrives in King's Landing late in the season. Unloading priority has been promised to a Lannisport fleet carrying western iron and northern timber. The Tyrells read this as an insult and a test. If their ships wait, some grain spoils. If they bully their way in, the watch must either defer to reach muscle or enforce the schedule. The regents can avert a demonstration by paying a premium for immediate labor on the piers, and by allocating one pier to Tyrell grain under a public decree that praises their contribution to the realm's sustenance while docking them a small face-saving fee for late notice. Politics is often an exercise in avoiding the need to use force by inventing a tariff. Handle the first convoys deftly and the logistics captains will write the new routines into their ledgers. Handle them clumsily and you manufacture a coalition against your rules. The cost of deftness is modest coin. The cost of clumsiness is a city's mood. A later crisis will concern law. A Riverland's household petitions for compensation for men and women murdered by Westermen before the compact was signed. They have names and bones. They have a bard. They have loud cousins. If the court refuses the petition, the compact earns the permanent hatred of families whose sorrow feeds politics for decades. If the court grants the petition in full, Westermen see it as a Lannister humiliation by proxy, and Tywin's patience curdles. The workable path is a mixed remedy, a crown-funded restitution fund to compensate victims of the war that was avoided, financed by a small general war tax levied equally across North and West, and accompanied by an amnesty for named soldiers to prevent witch hunts. No one person is satisfied. Everyone's cost is small enough to pay. The probability that such an elegant compromise can be arranged depends on whether the regents can persuade their proudest vassals that the alternative is worse. That is leadership. It cannot be faked. Ned's reputation helps. Tywin's authority helps. Together they can force a peace that feels unjust but functions. Some will ask whether the alliance dissolves the underlying contradiction between northern honor and western ambition. It does not. It manages it. The contraries can be made complementary under pressure. Honor without money is martyrdom. Money without honor is fear. Across 3 winters and 1 northern emergency, any realm that survives will be built by men who sacrificed a measure of their preferred virtue. The cost is not only theirs. It is borne by children betrothed for reasons they did not choose and by small folk who must eat bread stamped with new seals. The gain is not only coin. It is measured in roads not burned, in daughters not orphaned, in debt schedules met and thus in invasions not invited by weakness. What of the chance that the Reach or Dorne, denied their starring roles, will shape events to reclaim the narrative? The Reach prefers subtlety cloaked in banquets. They do not love pyres. If they cannot sell a queen to the compact, they will sell everything else. Grain, ships, whispers, and marriages for lesser cousins. The price they ask is not a crown but a permanent seat on the small council and tariff privileges that let their merchants retire younger than their northern counterparts. The compact can pay that price if it watches for the day when southern monopolies strangle northern craftsmen. Dorne asks for one thing that the compact least wants to concede: a public accounting for Elia. If the compact grants it, Tywin bleeds pride. If the compact denies it, Dorne's patience transforms into active subversion. The optimal approach is to separate justice from spectacle. A quiet settlement with the Martells that delivers named culprits and reparations disguised as dowry for a future marriage into the capital. It is amoral and effective. If Oberyn accepts, Dorne becomes a quiet partner who delights in seeing the Reach's nose kept out of the goblet. If he refuses, expect poisoned cups at clever feasts. The end-state probabilities depend on the first 1,000 days. If the compact survives the first winter, avoids humiliating either party in public, and handles 3 predictable crises: Tyrell docking, Riverland's restitution, and a faith flare, without blood in the streets, Cold Concord rises to above half. Golden Trap dominates if Tywin cannot restrain his impulse to make the North a precedent for feudal obedience and if Cersei rebounds into influence. In that case, the probability of fratricide climbs toward the 4 in 10 mentioned, rising with every insult and with every rumor that the Queen resents northern girls who draw the eye. Austere coalition requires 2 unlikely beliefs to persist: that the North's warnings are real, and that the West's coin must pay for adventure that yields no direct power dividends. If reports from the Wall remain ambiguous, the coalition will be starved domestically, and its probability sits near 1 in 4. If a catastrophe provides proof, it spikes because evidence turns skeptics into zealots faster than sermons do. In those worlds where white shadows are proven, even old enemies hold hands out of necessity, and alliances otherwise brittle gain unexpected tensile strength. Costs for each state can be priced. Cold Concord charges the realm in hypocrisy tolerated, injustice deferred, and in the soft coercion of betrothals that foreclose other futures. Its dividend is a predictable tax base, ports open more often than not, and accumulated grain stocks that act like a civilizational savings account. Golden Trap costs blood in quantities known too well and also costs credit. Once a compact is betrayed, the Iron Bank writes it down, and future crowns pay higher rates on every loan. The long-term cost is cynicism that corrodes recruitment for the Watch and the courts alike. Men will serve only themselves. Austere coalition costs comfort across all classes and prestige among lords who prefer feasts to ice. Its dividend is survival if the North's terrors are true and a leaner, cleaner polity if they are not, because the reforms enacted for war, transparent budgets, merit-based commands, frictionless grain logistics, will be hard to roll back once their efficiency is proven. So can a Stark and Lannister alliance change history? Cannot rewrite character, but it can redirect its flow. It launders Lannister power through northern legitimacy and launders northern morality through western efficiency. It lowers the ceiling on catastrophe and raises the floor on competence. It is not romantic. It is a contract signed with cold hands for a colder world. It delays war and moderates it if it comes. It feeds bellies that otherwise would have been empty and fills treasuries that otherwise would have been looted. It gives the wall time to speak and gives the court reason to listen. It creates losers who deserve to lose and winners who, for once, use their winnings to build rather than burn. Can fail through spite, hunger, or zeal, and the chances of failure are not negligible. But if it holds, if hosts and hostages are managed with the dull care that politics actually requires, then the songs of the next generation will be boring, and boring songs save lives. The lion gains a conscience. The wolf gains a ledger. The realm gains a winter. Let me make it plainer. The pre-alliance baseline produces 5 kings, feasts of crows, and an adolescence of dragons as erratic as weather. The compact produces a single king of easy smile ND uncertain blood, a queen of quiet strength, and a council composed of 2 men who ordinarily would only meet in war. Branch points abound. Tywin's pride, Cersei's envy, Ned's scruple, Robb's willingness, Myrcella's fate, Theon's voyage, Stannis' fury, Balon's restlessness, Mace Tyrell's appetite, Oberyn's patience, Lisa's paranoia. Assign numbers and you can see the shape of it. 60% the Rock accepts, 70% the North signs, 80% Robb consents, 60% hostages remain well and visible, 30% Balon tries his luck, 40% Stannis insists on war, 50% the faith quiets itself under a queen who feeds the poor, 25% the wall sends proof that shakes the capital from its habits. Multiply across, and the most probable near future is a realm held together not by love but by reasonable payment schedules, a shared fear of famine, and children who read together under guard. That is not a bad prognosis for a continent where spring was an accident and kingship a temporary costume worn by survivors. There are histories in which even this compact crumbles. In some, Golden Trap springs and the North learns again that Southern promises travel faster than Southern regiments. In others, austere coalition expends its strength against something no alliance was designed to fight and breaks anyway, leaving behind legends about sacrifices that cynics twist into fairy tales. And in a few, cold concord lasts long enough that Tommen and Sansa reign in more than name. Their children know both gods, the Riverlands write poems about bridges that never burned, and the Tyrells grow fat on tariffs instead of titles. Those are worlds where bored scribes complain about the monotony of tax receipts and where maesters compose treatises on the optimization of granary placement. That literature puts poets out of work. It also keeps undertakers idle. If the question is whether wolves and lions together can change history, the answer is yes. If the question is whether they can change nature, the answer is no. But nature can be disciplined, and discipline is the difference between endings sung by bards who never saw snow and endings remembered by old men who have all their fingers. Now consider the associ margin that the realm habitually ignores until sails are sighted off the gullet. A compact that keeps the capital solvent and disciplined changes the incentives across the narrow sea. Pentoshi and Bravosi brokers prefer clients who pay. When the West posts letters of credit co-signed by Winterfell, the cost of mercenaries quietly rises for any claimant who would invade. The Golden Company will still swear it keeps its word, but its captains will calculate that a united realm with full granaries is not the soft fruit they were promised. Volantis' eyes always turn west when it smells weakness. A calm, fed kings landing under a boy king flanked by 2 grown men is not weakness. It is boredom, and boredom does not invite elephants. The free cities respond to prices. When prices say the crown can outbid pirates for winter convoy protection, piracy becomes seasonal rather than structural, and a seasonal nuisance does not topple regents. This is the dull magic of credit. It keeps dragons theoretical. Renly's path, in such a climate, bends toward accommodation rather than adventure. Without a quick route to a crown via Tyrell marriage, he becomes the realm's most charming liability rather than its most dangerous. The compact can turn him into a festival, and festivals do not rebel. Give him tournaments to organize, river levees to open with a ribbon, and a chair that matters only when it does not. Flatter him with a title that sounds like command, Lord Justiciar of the Crownlands, paired with subordinates who actually do the work. He will burn with the desire to be essential. He will not summon storms for a post that keeps him fed and adored. The probability that he attempts a break under Cold Concord drops to 2 in 10. It rises under Golden Trap because pride recruits pride, and the Reach loves a stage when the script turns bloody. Stannis will still demand law, and law in this arrangement requires theater as well. The only peaceful way to digest him is to give him a forum that sounds like the god's own text. A great council called to affirm Tommen's minority and to codify the regent's remit can fold legitimacy into precedent. The lords who attend have 2 motives: to be seen and to be fed. Feed them, and present them with sealed witness statements from maesters on the succession, pointedly avoiding slander while emphasizing the realm's need for continuity. Offer Stannis a permanent seat as Lord Admiral with an independent budget and the right to audit the royal fleet. Couple this offer with a referendum-like pledge that the next such council in 10 years will revisit succession questions should heaven send clearer portents. It is sophistry, but it hands him a sword with a legal scabbard. The chance he accepts remains low because he believes in arithmetic, not appetite. Yet he is also a man who knows ships, and ships without funds are statues. 3 in 10 he nods and goes to sea to do honest work. 7 in 10 he smolders. Smoldering under a compact is manageable. It leaks in letters rather than fires in cities. The texture of daily rule reveals whether such grand bargains have marrow. Look at Winterfell with Tommen in residence. The boy is malleable. The danger is not his cruelty but whose hands shape him. A northern regimen can be designed to produce a king who listens. Pre-dawn lessons with the maester on grain tallies and river levels. Noon rides in snow with men who are silent and competent. Afternoons in the Godswood where the old faith imposes patience by its very stillness. Once each moon a letter dictated to the small council in King's Landing. Not with policy but with questions that force the council to explain itself.
Place Bezidache.
I'm a page from a middling house who is paid to be honest rather than odd. Rotate that page every season so that sycophancy never hardens. The soft risk is Cersei's correspondence, gilded with maternal devotion and sharpened with grievance. Counter it by inviting her to write, then reading her letters aloud at supper before a room that speaks plain northern truths. Letters lose their poison when treated as poetry. Casterly Rock with Arya is a rougher fit, which is why it helps. She will hate embroidery and love the echoing halls. She will chase cats and names. She will not curtsy on command. The Rock can handle this if it decides to boast about it. A regimen exists there too. Swordplay under watchful masters hired for discretion. A tutor in contracts and in coin whose ideas bore her but settle as seeds. Afternoons in galleries of ancestral tapestries where the quiet art is not to lecture but to ask questions about what power looked like when it had to be painted. Tyrion is the natural instrument here if Tywin allows it, because he straddles law and laughter. If he becomes Arya's translator to Lannister gravity, she will grow without being tamed, and the North will start to believe that the lions can laugh at themselves. If Tywin forbids it because the sight offends him, Arya will grow wild in corners, and Cersei will harvest her missteps for sport. The difference lives in a single order drafted in the Lord Protector's hand. Assign Tyrion as keeper of trade routes and as the Rock's resident envoy to the fostering program. A title crafted to dignify what is also a leash. Edmure Tully's Riverlands become the pivot between patience and pettiness. Under the compact, he is asked to forgive without forgetting. His best tool is a ledger. He can commission, with Regent's coin, a census of bridges, mills, and toll houses, marked with dates of past sack and current repair. Publish this minimum record as a broadsheet distributed to towns. This bridge stands because no army marched. This mill runs because no lord burned it. Bureaucracy is not art, but it is memory the small folk can read. In the footnotes, name the houses that signed the compact and the tax relief that follows from it. The phrase will bristle at anything that makes a bridge famous unless their bridge is fame's focal point. Buy them with stone and show. Assign crown engineers to reinforce the twins with a second span and a better gatehouse, and cast in iron the names of fry men who died in the last real war, as if the Riverlands had a war that the compact prevented. Men forgive when they are flattered, especially men whose pride is a ledger of slights. Roose Bolton is trouble wearing gloves. In any world, his preference is a docile liege and a distracted enemy. The compact gives him half, denies him half. He will test Winterfell's appetite for auditing the Dreadfort's taxes and levies, and he will test it by being exemplary on paper while cruel in practice. The answer is to deputize his son's rival, or some appropriately competent cousin from a minor cadet branch who dreams of elevation, and to put that rival in charge of a rotating circuit court that sits in Bolton lands twice a year with a northern captain of guards whose loyalty is to coin stamp jointly with Wolf and Lion. Hold court in public. Summon witnesses by name. Record judgments in ink and in song. Roose thrives in shadows. He starves under minutes and candles. If this sounds like peacetime fuss, it is unavoidable insurance. The moment Roose senses that the compact cannot coordinate legal action, he will coordinate violence in its place. The City Watch is where the compact either becomes adult or remains a truce. Uniforms and arrears payments will buy 6 months of competence. Beyond that, culture matters. Dual regents must create a habit the Watch can internalize. Whoever pays their wages today cannot command them to reverse yesterday's lawful order. This requires a written duty code pinned in every barracks and read aloud each 7th day by a septon and a silent sister, alternating. Not for piety only, but because the habit of public reading in ritual primes men to resist private whispers. Promotions published, dismissals posted, rewards for reporting bribe offers, paid in coin that is seen and counted. If a captain is caught taking 2 purses for one job, do not exile him. Try him with both sigils present, then strip him and send him to the wall accompanied by 50 colleagues who must hear the sentence together. It is slow, and it leaves fewer men to patrol for a week. That week buys 2 years of cleaner fear in thieves' hearts. Littlefinger's containment cannot be left to titles. It must be left to ledgers in other people's hands. The office of Master of Coin should be split quietly into 2 permanent bureaus, one for revenue and one for disbursement, each with its own independent warehouse of records and its own master key, 1 wolf, 1 lion. The masters will coordinate only when necessary and are forbidden to meet alone. Give Baelish the portfolio that puts him under the maximum number of eyes. Ports, customs, and harbor duties. It is glamourless money and full of opportunities for useful fatigue. Assign to his bureau an assistant handpicked by Ned, whose only job is to publish monthly summaries in plainer language than Baelish prefers, hanging them in the city's market squares. Baelish will adapt by inventing derivative instruments whose complexity defies explanation. The summaries will not catch the trick, but the inspectors he and Varys and Tyrion all fear, the Iron Bank's auditors, will. Invite those auditors once a year and give them rooms with locks only they can open. You cannot prevent a spider from spinning. You can make the web uglier than the room it hides in. Varys handles weather, not roads. Under a compact, weather matters less, but storms still come. Tell him openly that his usefulness will be judged on 2 axes: foreign plots and northern anomalies. Pay him a bounty for each plot he exposes before it costs coin or blood, and pay him double for each time he corroborates a warning from the wall with independent birds. If 10 reports out of 20 are nothing, he will still be believed for the 10 that match footprints on fresh snow and burned villages on the Frostfangs. If none match, reduce his budget slowly rather than dramatically. Spymasters who feel cornered do not retire, they deliver crises to regain importance. The Reach cannot be simply paid off. It must be bound into a game it believes it can win. The instrument is not grain pricing alone, it is fashion. If the court decrees a schedule of seasonal feasts where the menu and floral arrangements rotate among regional styles, northern salt and smoke, Western gilded roasts, Reach gardens on plates, Dornish spice. And if the Reach's turn becomes the moment when all embassies are received and all marriages announced, then no one in Highgarden will want the capital to burn. They will want the capital as a theater for their taste. Offer Marjorie a role that sounds like sovereignty, mistress of revels and charity, responsible for organizing alms and festivals, and seed in her budget a line item that can expand during winters to feed the poor. The more she is seen to feed the poor, the harder it is for her house to argue that the compact starves them. Dorne's justice problem cannot be solved by speeches. It requires a body and a boundary. Name the dead relevant to Elia's end in a sealed bill attached to a private settlement. Offer Oberyn a duel in law's name that is not a duel in the yard. A trial by judiciary conducted by a panel of maesters and Dornish jurists with the authority to strip landed rights from Gregor-type offenders even posthumously, with lands diverted to crown trusteeship that funds a Dornish dowry for a future crown marriage. The public sees restitution without spectacle. Dorne sees a balance sheet where pain is converted into property that returns to them under prettier names. It is not dignified. It is not honorable by northern definitions. It works often enough to lower the probability of poison at feasts from 6 in 10 to 2. Ironborn appetites are better redirected than starved. Offer Balon a royal commission to prey on Stepstone's pirates under letters of marque that convert the old way into a legal business. Every kraken sunk beyond a charted meridian earns a percentage of recovered cargo and the right to host a fair at Lordsport where seized goods are auctioned under crown supervision. It will not cure him of salt. It will drain his need to prove contempt for the land. Asha sees contracts as levers and may persuade her father that reputation for naval ruthlessness pays better in coin than in corpses that do not write songs. Theon is the coin flipped in the air. Keep him close to Robb as an aide-de-camp who handles southern correspondences. He then becomes the face of the compact in Pike's eyes, a boy they recognize whose letters carry the scent of halls they resent. If Theon is sent home prematurely, chance dictates whether he returns as Bridge or Spark. The odds favor Spark if Balon is still alive. They favor Bridge if Asha is ascendant. A disciplined realm plays with its mint last. Debasement is a drug that buys today by mortgaging tomorrow's trust. The compact must resist minting lighter lions or stags. Instead, it can raise liquidity by formalizing promissory notes secured by jointly assessed customs revenues at 3 ports: Lannisport, King's Landing, White Harbor. Publish the formula by which notes convert to coin after harvest or winter convoy landings. Let market stalls post their current trading discount for notes beside their prices. Visibility is inoculation against panic. If wolves and lions must secretly melt plate to pay salaries, they should melt their own, not the realm's. Bravos will notice and reward such self-punishment with marginally better rates, which cascade into cheaper bread. The Citadel is a quiet battlefield. Most archmasters do not like miracles, and a compact asks them to police their own certainty. Invite a delegation north in late autumn to audit the Wall's reports. Treat them well. Give them data and discomfort. If they return with gooseflesh and grudging curiosity, the realm gains a narrative that educated men can repeat without blushing. Winter behaves in cycles. Cycles can be measured. Measures can be acted upon. If they return dismissive, the compact must widen its coalition to include practical men who have no patience for scrolls, miller guilds, drovers, salt merchants, and make them the public face of the Northern Watch Fund. Money convinces faster than essays. Disease is the saboteur most likely to slip past careful politics. A winter plague in King's Landing will follow hunger if granaries misfire by even a month. The compact should borrow engineering ideas from free cities that learned hard lessons. Quarantine wharves beyond the chain, inspection shacks staffed by women of the faith and by silent sisters who know when to burn clothing, public notice boards that post the names of neighborhoods under temporary cordon with the date the cordon will lift, and a legal right for dockworkers to refuse a cargo if the inspector's seal is missing. None of this is romantic. It is also the kind of governance that stops single germs from becoming a movement with a prayer book. A century of feudal reflexes must be massaged into a decade's habit. That habit is joint musters. Once each summer not consumed by war, the North and West should hold a combined exercise in the Riverlands with small units. Hundreds, not thousands, so roads are not destroyed by overuse. Swap officers. Share drill books, standardize signal flags and beacon codes. Agree on the precise words shouted down lines when a sudden retreat is ordered. The practical result is obvious if war returns. The subtler result is cross-house friendships that make betrayal personal. Ghostly. The more men who drink together, the fewer arrows fly by surprise on day one of any feud. It is not a guarantee. It is a discount on risk. All of these measures operate under the gravity of the three endings already outlined. The compact can try to bend that gravity but not deny it. Cold concord thickens when these routines become boring and thus sacred. Golden trap snaps when routines are mocked from either end and when one small humiliation is allowed to grow muscular. Austere coalition coheres when routines are flexed to serve a northern emergency and the serving is done with public pride rather than private grudge. Play out, then, a detailed cold concord to see its strengths and points of fracture. Year 1 closes with 3 quiet ceremonies. In the first, Tommen swears a child's oath to the gods wood at Winterfell to guard the realm with warmth when winter comes. Phrasing chosen to be small enough for a boy and large enough for poets. In the second, Sansa opens 2 granaries inside King's Landing with locks built by Lannister smiths. She allows the small folk to touch the door and to see the grain to convince themselves this is not a trick. In the third, a joint audit releases a table of tariffs that lowers certain customs on northern furs and western iron when shipped to each other's ports, to much gnashing from merchants elsewhere and much laughter in taverns that smell opportunity. These rituals are not accidents. They are scaffolding. They make the alliance something the realm can point at without summoning kings or accounts. Year 2 brings the first true external test. A Stepstone's war among Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh that spills pirates up the narrow sea. The Crown charters 5 Lannisport cogs and 4 White Harbor cogs, crews them with mixed companies, and places command under a Stormlander veteran nominated by Stannis as Lord Admiral, a concession that tastes like law to him and like order to Tywin. The fleet loses 1 ship and 3 anchors but clears trade lanes enough that winter convoys only slip by weeks, not by months. Grain prices spike 8% and then fall. This is not newspaper trivia. It is the kind of result that siphons away the faith's oxygen for revolt. You do not pick up a pitchfork when your children are fed. Year 3 reveals the soft underbelly of cold concord. Boredom toxifies courts faster than crisis does. Cersei, denied theater, manufactures it. She cultivates a salon with ladies who prefer venom to virtue, and she uses rumor as a blade. The danger is not that she whispers about bastardy, too dangerous to say, but that she whispers about northern coldness, about queens who do not bleed blue enough, about a court that prefers counting to laughing. Poison talk is not fatal on its own. It becomes fatal when a young king repeating harsh northern phrases sounds like contempt to southern ears. Counter this with a procession in reverse. The young king rides south to tour the Mander with Sansa and a northern guard that is deliberately cheerful and laden with small gifts for Seps. He blesses loaves publicly, prays formally at the starry September, and speaks 3 sentences in a Reach accent he has practiced painfully. Cultural diplomacy is tedious. It makes the next decade possible. In Year 4 the mines in the West reveal their age. Production numbers decline just enough that a careful clerk notices and a careless bard hears. Tywin, who already knew, has concealed it by accounting tricks and by borrowing. The compact must absorb this fact before it becomes a weapon against itself. Ned will hate the lie. He will also understand that to expose it in public would humiliate his partner into the kind of rage that writes history in red. The compromise is a quiet debt restructuring with bravos. West paper swapped for bond tranches backed by joint customs revenue, with a schedule that extends maturities and lowers rates by a hair in exchange for transparency requirements that Bravos insists upon and Tywin agrees to with his mouth while gnashing his teeth in private. Publish a partial truth that the mines need reinvestment and that such reinvestment is underway, and then actually invest. Say for shafts, better pumps, new timbers. It does not conjure gold. It buys time and keeps rumor from becoming identity. While cold concord stabilizes, Golden Trap nurses its appetite on the margins. Picture an alternative Year 3 in which a Bolton case before the circuit court exposes atrocity, and the wolf insists on a hanging. Tywin sees not a man's neck but a principle slipping, the notion that northern courts can embarrass western lords. He leans on procedure and proposes a transfer to a capital tribunal where delay is a pardon.
Ned refuses.
This is how betrayals begin, with constitutional arguments between partners who both have a point. If sense prevails, the tribunal sits in the Riverlands under a panel that includes one neutral Vale Lord, and the rope remains a rope. If pride prevails, envoys stop smiling, tariffs become cudgels, and one caravan is stopped at a toll gate by accident. Each such accident raises the hazard rate for war by 1/10. After 10 soldiers march, austere coalitions' live texture can also be sketched. Imagine a letter from the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch in late Year 2. Not a panicked scrawl, but a careful ledger of disappearances, blue-eyed raiders, and animals found frozen in attitudes of terror. Ned believes. Tywin doubts. The Compact's test is where it sends its first extra 1,000 men. If it sends them north with carts and maesters and blacksmiths, the coalition is born. If it sends them south to the Stormlands to impress Stannis, the coalition dies. Managers appear in this story whom no singer will name. A miller who calculates how much flour to leave in White Harbor, an ox driver who knows which ford still runs in winter, a summer islander captain who risks an icebound coast because the Queen sent him a letter I. In her own hand, the coalition wins not when a king waves a sword, but when these unseen decisions align because the Compact pushed coin into the right palms at the right time. Into any of these arcs, a dragon may intrude. If Daenerys Targaryen sails with fire at her shoulders, the Alliance's prior work decides whether she conquers a starving city that welcomes change or a fed city that scowls at adventure. A healthy granary and a disciplined watch make the Blackwater a moat rather than a magnet. The Reach will flirt with dragons as it flirts with any rising sun. A compact that has made Marjorie useful and loved makes her house hesitate. The Iron Bank will lend to whichever side will pay. A regency with a decade of timely coupons creates habits bankers do not like to break. Dragons do not fear habit. Men do. If the dragons come under cold concord, expect negotiation, not instant surrender. Promises of restoration of Targaryen titles, marriages that knit fire to law, and a careful allotment of space where dragons may fly without roasting harvests. If they come under Golden Trap, chaos becomes a ladder for everyone. If they come under austere coalition, dragons become another tool in a larger northern war, an alliance of necessity within an alliance of necessity, the kind of layering that either saves continents or snaps spines. The personal arcs become policy levers in slow motion. Sansa, schooled to feed and to speak gently, becomes the court's conscience in public and its allocation committee in private. Given control over a queen's household budget, she can endow bakeries whose flour quotas rise automatically when prices cross thresholds. She can knot chains of gratitude that outlast single winters. If she is undermined by older women who prefer cruelty to competence, the Compact loses lubrication and begins to grind. Her opposite number, Cersei, is most dangerous when she can claim to defend her children against a cold court. Answer that claim by giving her visible, finite projects, restoration of a specific sept, patronage of a midwives' guild, that allow her to parade victories without touching policy. When pride must be fed, feed it something harmless but fat. Robb is not king in this world, and that changes him. Kept at Winterfell as war captain without a war, he will chafe. The Compact should send him south periodically with small commands, 200 men to escort grain, a detachment to supervise repairs on the Rosby Road. Not because the tasks require him, but because he requires the tasks. Competence grows with responsibility exercised, and boredom breeds honor's dangerous cousin. The itch to prove. Give him work he can fail gently at. Let him fail. Let him learn. If he is kept idle, someone will manufacture a task for him with a blade in it. Tyrion as a hinge is a tempting cliché because he makes readers comfortable. As a policy instrument, he is in fact useful because he reads books and gutters at the same time. Charging him with trade routes and fostering coordination gives him levers that do not threaten Tywin's stage while making him indispensable to daily function. His vices are not fatal if his schedule is full. His virtues bloom when he is trusted to do sums publicly. The chance that he turns traitor in such a world drops to 1 in 10. The chance that he blunders rises if he is humiliated, not because he hates the realm, but because humiliated men drink until the room blurs and then make jokes that move armies. There is a version of this history in which a single accident, not a policy, kills the compact. The accident can be as small as a horse throwing Tommen on ice while hunting near the Wolfswood, or as loud as a fire in a Casterly rock nursery that mocks all watchfulness. Contingency planning is not morbid. It is the difference between grief and war. Draft now, before candles burn low, a joint protocol for hostage injury or death that includes 4 steps. Immediate public statement by both regents reading the same prepared paragraph. Dispatch of the other hostage into the opposite house's embrace with triple the usual guard. Declaration of mourning rites observed identically in both capitals. Appointment of a neutral commission of maesters and silent sisters to investigate with a fixed timetable. If the accident is in truth an assassination, the protocol may still buy 10 days in which soldiers do not move on rumor. 10 days can be a lifetime. Numbers settle arguments that words inflame. Build a working model in ledgers of the alliance's hazard rates. If trust drops below 40% for 2 consecutive months, the model raises the probability of Golden Trap by 15 points. If granary levels in King's Landing fall below 60 days' supply during winter, the probability of a faith flare rises by 20. If the watch reports 3 confirmed white encounters within a season, the probability of austere coalition triggers spikes by 30. Publish these forecasts to no one. Use them to nudge. When the index moves, summon festivals, audits, ship charters, or pilgrimages not because a poem demanded one but because the meter did. It is unfashionable to say that kingdoms should be governed by rulers who read tables. It is also how kingdoms avoid pyres. Temptations toward symbolic justice must be rationed. The mountain deserves to answer for his past. So do others with names that loan gravity to grudges. But justice that comes too early looks like revenge. Justice that comes too late looks like cowardice. The sweet spot is when the compact's credit is strongest, when its enemies are quiet, and when a highborn man from another region commits a lesser crime publicly. Try that man harshly and fairly. Make the trial the proof that nobles bleed under the law. Then, with that precedent fresh and the realm nodding, ask for the older names to be considered under the same rules. Doing the hard case first is the moral fantasy. Doing the easy case first is the political method T. Hat makes the hard case possible. Ned will taste ash in his mouth as he signs the order. Tywin will taste iron. That shared bitterness is the seal. If the compact endures a decade, noble children will not remember a world before wolf and lion. The words will become a hyphen rather than a headline. At that point, the alliance ceases to be an arrangement and turns into a norm, which is when nothing is so vulnerable. Prosperity's children get ideas. They will want romance where their parents accepted rationing, and they will explore ideologies the faith dresses up when bored, reform crusades that call tariff suppression, liberty tales that call garrisons occupation, border men who write songs about ancient kings only one god ever loved. The answer cannot be gags. It must be curricula. Schools for the sons of petty lords and wealthy merchants in the capital where the arithmetic of roads, granaries, and debts is taught as if it were chivalry. Show them how a convoy is assembled. March them through a bakery at dawn. Make them balance a harbor's accounts under watch. Teach them the machinery that keeps them bored. The best myth a healthy realm can spawn is the myth of competence. Press the scenarios further into their endings to price their ultimate costs. Cold Concord at 15 years looks like a realm whose greatest crisis in memory is a contested mintage and a drought on the Mander that was solved by dredging. Its cost is that those who were wronged before the compact die of old age without the apology they deserved. Their children inherit stories that do not itch like their parents' scars, and a segment of the realm becomes sentimental about a justice they never had to risk blood to demand. The risk is cyclical. In a generation, a cunning demagogue can point to those deferred hurts and ask why the realm was built on selective amnesia. If such a voice gains traction during a new winter, Cold Concord can decay into a new world of bright young zealots who believe they invented courage. Golden Trap at 15 years rarely exists. It tends to explode by year 5. If it does not, it hardens into occupation and insurgency. Western garrisons in northern towns, northern snipers in western passes, ferrymen counting bodies as carefully as coin. The cost here is not measured in dead nobles alone. It is measured in habits learned by small folk. The habit of hiding grain from taxmen, the habit of lying to soldiers as easily as to creditors, the habit of letting the faith mediate disputes because the law has become an enemy's language. Those habits linger even when the banners change. After Golden Trap, no alliance finds easy purchase for a generation. The coin premium the realm pays on every loan is a tax on betrayal. Austere coalition at 15 years, if the others came and were held at great cost, resembles a realm that looks north for its identity and south for its pleasures. The watch is no longer a punishment but an honor. The faith has built sermons around the idea that all gods approved of fires lit on ice. Southern lords boast of winters survived as if they were battles won, and they are right. The cost is subtler. Militarization's habits take root. The small council speaks in muster numbers as easily as grain tallies. Boys raised on heroic stories of frost and flame cannot be satisfied by wheat yields alone. Their appetite for risk in foreign policy rises. A realm that learned to coordinate for survival may be tempted to coordinate for expansion. An expansion across a narrow sea full of petty princes and slaves looks moral if your own army thinks itself holy. This is how victory can teach the wrong lessons. To counter that arc, the coalition must demobilize publicly, ritualizing its return to peace with as much ceremony as it used to gird for war. The most fragile component of every path is still the human tendency to mistake personal grievance for public principle. Tywin cannot be cured of pride. Ned cannot be cured of conscience. Each can be made to admire the other's better angels occasionally and to tolerate the other's devils often. They require witnesses. Kevin is the witness for Tywin, Catelyn for Ned. Kevin's job is to pull his brother aside when the ledger and the lash are vying and to say, in the voice that only brothers have, that empire built on insult collapses because insult does not scale. Catelyn's job is to walk her husband into the Godswood and say, with the steadiness only wives whose sons might die can find, that law serves life, not the other way around. These interventions are not constitutional clauses. They are the texture of survival. Ask, lastly, what the realm looks like if the compact fails early despite all these precautions, not from treachery but from indifference. If the letters are sent but never felt, if the joint rituals happen but never matter, if the hostages are safe but never loved, then the alliance becomes a ceiling under which men calculate without dreaming. That world does not burn immediately. It decays. Petty toll increases here, a sullen watch there, a captain resold 3 times before his march, a sept's alms shortened by a sliver each month. Politics becomes management and then becomes extraction. The best young minds leave for Bravos or Old Town. The wall is staffed by men who failed at everything else. When a real storm comes, of ice, of dragons, of plague, the realm discovers that its muscles are thick but its nerves are numb. Cold concord without warmth becomes a kind of civilizational anemia. Avoiding that requires something that no ledger can mint. A sense, at least among the people who decide, that the alliance is not only a hedge against hunger but a scaffold for decency. So the question returns with less romance and more utility. Can a Stark, Lannister alliance change history? It can, and it does so most when it refuses the very drama that makes history quotable. It biases the coin tosses toward order. It buys time against the kind of winter that erases. It converts personal dispositions, Tywin's fastidious cruelty, Ned's inflexible mercy, into an equilibrium that neither man would invent alone but both can serve. It needs luck around children and weather. It needs rituals that turn into instincts. It needs good clerks. It must survive the first accident that looks like sabotage and the first famine that looks like judgment. It must pay more of its debts than it wants to and forgive fewer of its enemies than it is tempted to. It must be dull on purpose and dramatic only by mistake. If it succeeds, you will not notice it. To the people who matter most, it will feel like mornings where bread is available and the watch seems an honorable bore and the Queen's charities arrive on time. It will feel like a bridge you do not think about as you cross it. It will feel like a feast where the biggest tension is whether the northern course should precede the Dornish. And if it fails, you will notice everything at once. Wolves in chains, lions drenched in their own adornment, ships that do not dock, temples that preach hunger as holiness, and a sky that throws knives of ice. Between those worlds stand choices made in committee rooms and godswoods, and an agreement that sounds like blasphemy to romantics and like arithmetic to men who bury their own. In that arithmetic, the sum of a ledger and a vow is not poetry, but it is shelter, and sometimes shelter is the only thing a realm needs to have a later argument about poetry.